In this lesson, we'll be talking about all things set design. Here we will cover what materials and textures you can use to execute your designs.
So what you want to think about when you're designing your sets is that every single thing that you include is going to communicate something. Like we talked about with the principles of photography, all of those things are going to come into play here, and you're going to want to think about the colors that you choose to use, the textures, and what the emphasis is going to be in your set. The important thing when you're shooting product is that you want the product to be front and center. You want that to be the star of the show. So you want to design your sets in a way where the product will be visible and clear, and it will really be the focus. So 3 of the elements of photography that we discussed earlier that we're going to apply to our set in this shoot are color, repetition, and contrast. So the colors that we use are the brand colors of Tower 28, and the main color that we're going to be using is this bright pop of red, which is perfect because we're trying to create images that are very eye-catching. And red is going to help us do that. When people are scrolling through their feed, they're going to see that pop of red and they're going to stop and want to look at that photo. And I think color is one of the easiest ways to really make an image pop, especially if you maybe use 2 bright contrasting colors together that kind of vibrate and create some movement within the photo. That's a great way to make your images really stand out. But we're also going to be pairing that red with some more neutral tones so that the red isn't overpowering. So you'll see us use a lot of cream and mauve and some light pink to kind of tone the red down a little bit so it's not too crazy. The next element we're going to be applying is repetition. So we're going to be repeating elements throughout all 3 of the images that we create, and this is going to make our shoot more unified. So one of the elements we're going to be repeating is a shape. There's a wavy line that is in the Tower 28 logo that we really love and we wanted to bring into this set. So you'll see a wavy line either painted or there's going to be one where the wavy line is actually cut out in the background. We're also going to be repeating colors and some of the textures to just really unify everything all together. We're also going to be applying contrast. So we'll be using contrast in the colors. Like we mentioned, there will be a bright red contrasted with some more neutral colors. And then there's also going to be contrast in the textures that we use. So we're going to be using a smooth background that will be contrasted with the sand that we're going to use. And we're using sand because Tower 28, when we were doing our research on them, they started in Los Angeles. They're a California brand, really inspired by the beach. Tower 28 is an actual lifeguard tower that they're named after. And so we wanted to bring that element into the shoot to kind of go back to their roots. But we're going to be using a mauve colored sand, so it's a little different than the sand you would typically find at the beach. It's more unique and it's really fun.
For our shoot specifically, we're going to be using particle board, but there are many other backgrounds or textures that you can use, like plywood, tile, paper, or fabric. What you choose will depend on what you want to communicate to your viewers. For example, if you want to communicate a natural bathroom scene, you might want to use tile.
Like we mentioned, for this shoot, we're going to be using particle board for our backgrounds. This is our most commonly used material. We use it all the time when we want to have a colorful background. And the reason that we use this over a piece of plywood, for example, is that it's ground up wood. So when you paint it, it's not going to have a wood grain coming through in the paint. So when you're working with particle board, if that's what you choose to use, I like to use a matte or flat interior house paint to change the color. And the reason I like to use that is because it already has primer in it and it's less coats that you have to do, but you could also just use matte craft paint that you get from the craft store. You'll want to make sure that you use a paint roller and not a paintbrush because that will create the smoothest surface possible. If you want to add any patterns in, you can paint those with a paintbrush or a small roller, and that's a really fun way to create some interest and some fun pops of color in your set. There's also going to be a piece that you'll see us use that is a wavy pattern that was cut out. And I cut that out using a jigsaw. You can also use a scroll saw and then just sand down the edges to make sure it's smooth and then paint it. The other great thing about particle board is that you can paint colors on both sides. So you can flip it around during a shoot and you have a totally different set on the other side of your board. And you can also sand it down and repaint them over and over and over again. So it's really a great affordable option to keep at your studio and use for a lot of your shoot.
It's also super sustainable and makes my job easier as a retoucher.
The other thing you want to think about when designing your sets is the scale. So this is why it's very helpful to have mock-ups. It's also helpful to kind of set things up in a mock way when you're creating your mock-up so that you can see the sizes of everything and make sure that it's going to fit within your cropping and that when you actually build things, they're to scale and the dimensions are correct.
In the next lesson, we're going to talk a little bit more about props, how to select them, and how you can modify them.